Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. In today's episode, I want to talk about intuition because basically it's the foundation for this entire podcast. So, I want to share more about just my perspective on what is intuition, maybe break it down a little bit, and really focus this episode on how I experience intuition because I think one, examples are fun, and two, it was really helpful to me when I was learning about intuition to hear examples of how other people experience intuition because one, it shows just how much variation and just how it can be so different for everyone, and it also shows how it can be really subtle. I think that before I started learning about intuition, I had this idea in my head that it was like this loud, booming voice that you're hearing. And when I started to learn about intuition more deeply, I started to better understand that most of the time it's occurring in more subtle or soft whispers. So let's start with what is intuition. So before this podcast, I did a quick Google search on what is the Google, just like the general definition of intuition. And Google said something along the lines of knowing something without conscious reasoning. And I thought that was good, but I think there's better. So I started to look at a few different options. There were some Pinterest type pictures, like the Pinterest pictures with quotes on them. And there were some that said intuition is your inner GPS, and intuition is the wisdom of the soul, and intuition is, what was the one that I really liked? It said something along the lines of intuition is okay, I looked at my notes. One said intuition is the intelligence of the heart and the knowledge of the soul. And another one said intuition is often seen as a way to access divine wisdom or guidance. And I feel like those definitions just feel maybe more resonant or aligned with the way that I experience intuition. It definitely feels like an inner GPS to me. We've talked about this, guiding me on my path, helping me to understand the next step that I should be taking or the next action or whatever the case is. It's leading me down a path. I also see intuition as a way to access the wisdom of my soul. It's this, I don't know, I think of it as a connection to something deeper, a connection to something beyond. Man, it's so tough to articulate what is intuition, and I think that everyone's going to give a different perspective. Again, going back to because everyone experiences intuition differently. Some people will say it's, you're a connection to your soul, or a connection to your higher self, or a connection to your spirit guides. There's so many different ways to talk about intuition, but they're kind of all, I view it as all one and the same. It's a connection to this divine wisdom or this divine guidance, and it's coming from within. Okay, so that's a little bit on my perspective of what is intuition. Now, breaking it down a little bit. So I actually just got done with a 4-month, I'll call it a group mentorship program. It was kind of like a mastermind. It was focused on things like intuition, energy healing, diving deeper. It was also shadow work, it was just a bunch of stuff. And when we started with intuition, the way that they broke it down was through the different senses and through the different clair senses. So the 4 clair senses that we learn about when we are learning to tune into our intuition is clairvoyance, clear seeing, clairaudience, which is clear hearing, clairsentience, which is clear feeling, and claircognizant, which is clear knowing. So There is a ton of information about the different clairs online, through podcasts. Like I've dug deep in like podcasts, especially. I love my podcasts, you guys. Like I love my podcasts. You can go down a lot of rabbit holes. So when I was learning about intuition, even like before joining this mentorship program, I was kind of going down the rabbit holes and understanding the different clairs and really the spectrum in which you can experience them. So I'll give you an example. When I first was thinking about clairvoyance, I was thinking, okay, someone who's clairvoyant is someone who can see spirit or spirits, or someone who like has visions. I feel like that's kind of like what you learn about on TV. And also, I think before diving into this myself, I was basing my understanding of intuition a lot on like what I learned from my dad growing up, because my dad is someone who I've always known to be intuitive, and he has shared a lot of stories about his time growing up and different things that he saw or heard. So when I would think about clairvoyance, I would think about, oh, like my dad had stories from when he was young of when he was able to like see spirits. And so I thought, okay, I'm not clairvoyant. But then I learned about the spectrum, and clairvoyance can be tied to basically receiving intuitive guidance through anything involving sight. So yes, on one end of the spectrum, this can be people who actually do see spirits. And I think of people like my niece who like her whole life has been able to see spirits. And then there's also like receiving information through dreams. That is actually a really big way that I receive intuitive information, through my dreams. And I can give you some examples in a second. Another one is like seeing signs. This is also a fun one that I like to do. I like to ask for signs and then see if they pop up in my reality. And I mean, even something like angel numbers. Like angel numbers, you're seeing them. You're seeing angel numbers. And me and angel numbers, like I just think that it's fun. I just think seeing angel numbers is just so fun. And the rate at which I see them, I like to call them out to my husband whenever I see like 1111, 222, 333, 444, etc. And he's like, Lisa, this is getting weird. He's like, it started off feeling like a coincidence, and now this feels like this is not just a coincidence anymore. And I'm like, yeah, I know. This is how I'm being made aware that I'm on the right track. So anyways, just like fun things like that, but anything through sight. So I'll give you some examples of how I experience clairvoyance. So one is through dreams. And a really interesting example that happened actually not too long ago, maybe this was actually like a few months ago. I think when I first signed up for my mentorship programs, maybe like 4 months ago, there was a stretch of 1 week where people were coming to me in my dreams and asking for healing and telling me specifically where they needed healing, which was fascinating to me, because then I would text the person the next morning, and like there was one specific example where someone came to me in my dreams and they were experiencing certain symptoms and they were kind of like brushing it off like it's not a big deal. And then when I texted them the next day, they were like, well, yeah, I do have that and that and that symptom, but like, yeah, it's not a big deal. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's like literally what you said in my dream. I think you should just like go to the doctor and like get that checked out. So that's an interesting example. And I mean, anyone who has just like maybe like a really, really vivid dream world. I also have a lot of reoccurring dreams that they'll just keep playing on loop. And I feel like it's my subconscious that's like, okay, Lisa, let's deal with this. Let's confront this. Let's face this. We're gonna just keep replaying these loops until you get it. So that's another way. Signs is a fun one for me. You kind of just like, I don't know, I feel like I would talk like this or like hear people talk like this kind of when you're growing up, or just like all throughout your life. You're like, oh, I asked for a sign, or I looked for a sign, or oh my God, that's a sign. And yeah, that's just kind of like normal or whatever, right? But when I started specifically asking for signs, and then I would see them, and that started to blow my mind. Okay, so I'll give you one of my favorite examples. This is from when like before any of the energy healing stuff took place. This is like before I even got pregnant, actually. So when I was preparing for pregnancy, like my husband and I, we knew we were going to start trying soon, or we were already trying. I was researching pregnancy heavily via podcasts. Yep, you guessed it. So I was just like listening to everything that I could find about pregnancy, what to expect when the baby's here, all of that sort of stuff. And I was listening to one specific podcast, and I came across an episode where they were talking about spirit babies. And I had never heard this term before, and it piqued my curiosity. So, you know how people talk about connecting with the spirit of a loved one after they pass? Like, that's common knowledge, or that's something that like most people have heard, right? Spirit babies, if you have not heard the term, like I had not, is the concept of connecting with your baby in spirit before they arrive. And in this podcast, they were talking about, just connecting with your spirit baby, talking to your spirit baby, asking questions like, what gender are you? Or asking for a sign, like, are you with me? So I was not even pregnant at this point in time, but I thought, you know what? I'm just gonna ask for a sign from my spirit baby. And when I had this thought, I was on a walk outside, and there were pink flowers just like all around me. And I thought, okay, I have an idea. Spirit baby, if you are with me, please send me pink flowers to my house within 1 week. So specific, right? And I had no idea how the flowers were going to arrive to my house. I mean, that's kind of like the whole point of the sign, right? I thought, my husband, he definitely gives me flowers, but he's more of like a special occasion type of flower giver. Not really like a random Wednesday type of flower giver. But his parents were staying with us at the time. They were in town visiting. And I thought, I don't know, maybe someone will come by, bring his mom flowers or something. Like, there's a way that flowers could arrive to my house. Like, there's always possibilities. So a few days pass by, no flowers. I kind of forget about it. And my husband's parents leave, they head back home, and my husband and I are kind of like resuming normal everyday life, and my husband goes to the gym. And he was kind of taking a while to get back. Like, I remember like cooking in the kitchen and starting to like looking at the time and being like, it's a little bit weird. Like, he should be back by now. I hope everything's okay. Maybe I should just call him and check on him, make sure he's okay. And when I go to reach for my phone, he comes through the door, and he walks through the door carrying a bouquet, whatever, of pink flowers and a teddy bear. And the teddy bear reads, like on the belly of the teddy bear, it says, "Number 1, Mom." And on the paws of the teddy bear is sewn on fabric, and on the fabric, it's pink flowers. And I was stunned. And I was like, oh my God, you're not gonna believe this. And I proceeded to tell him the whole story of like asking for the sign, and he showed up with the sign, and it's exactly this. And I think the thing that got me the most was the teddy bear, because it was like, I asked for pink flowers and my husband brought pink flowers, but with it, he brought a teddy bear that said "Number 1, Mom." And I remind you, I was not even pregnant at this time. So it felt like a direct message from my spirit baby, like, hey, one, I'm with you, and two, like, I love you already. Like, you're the best mom. So that was just crazy and so special, and I cried, obviously. And I think I actually did find out I was pregnant probably like a week after that took place. Yes, because I remember telling my friends the story um, a few days later, and then that night I took a pregnancy test and found out I was pregnant. So crazy, but all that to say, like, signs is a form of clairvoyance. It is a spectrum. There are a lot of different ways that you can receive intuitive information, guidance, even like signs that was like a form of communication. And I think that with some of those like signs or angel numbers or even like animal totems, I like to, like, I'll see random animals. I want to say, like, when I'm out in the wild, when I'm like just out living my life. Like one time there was an orange dragonfly that flew across me that it was like, I've never seen an orange dragonfly before in my life. I didn't even know that those existed. And then I looked up orange dragonfly totem and it was like the exact message that I needed that day. So it's just like little things that can be written off as coincidence, but when you're like really paying attention and when you're trusting that things aren't just a coincidence, then it gets like really fun and you realize the universe is literally speaking to you constantly all the time. Okay, let's move on to clairaudience. This is clear hearing. So I think similar to clairvoyance, when I heard of clairaudience, I thought it to be this like loud, booming voice that you hear, like a loud voice that isn't yours, that you hear like inside your head or I don't know, wherever you hear it. And I remember my dad actually telling me this story growing up of him one time. He was in the city with one of my siblings and they were just like walking down the street and they're waiting at a crosswalk and the crosswalk sign turns on to allow them to cross. And he was about to cross and he heard this voice inside his head. It just said, stop. And it kind of caught him off guard, but he stopped. And then he waited. And then a car runs a red light and just. So that voice like saved his life, right? If he hadn't heard that voice or listened to that voice, he would have crossed the street and him and my sibling could have gotten hit by a car. So that was kind of like the example that I had heard growing up. I remember my dad telling us that story a handful of times. And so that's what I thought of when I think of clairaudience. And I do actually have one story of hearing a voice in my head that wasn't mine. Again, kind of related to pregnancy, baby stuff. So I'll share that story. But every other time that I've experienced clairaudience, it's a voice in my head that sounds just like my own. And that was like the trip when I first started learning about clairaudience and how to tune into it. It's like most people don't experience that loud booming voice in their head that isn't theirs. Like it does happen, absolutely for sure. And of course, like everyone is going to have like varying levels of this, right? And like even if one person does occasionally hear that, they'll still experience this on a spectrum. So how I learned or how I was taught in my mentorship program is oftentimes it will sound exactly like your voice, but you have to get really good at learning to tune into how it feels. This is where it's going to get a little bit tricky to articulate or explain because I'm still learning this as well. So I can give you some examples here. For me, how do I say this? It kind of feels like the difference between thinking it and hearing it. Like if you think about actively thinking something, like that feels a certain way. And then when you think about like when you hear something, it's almost like you hear it and then you process it versus like processing it as you're thinking it. Does that make sense? I know you can't respond to me, so I'm just gonna say like either that made sense or it won't, and that's okay, let it marinate. Um, so I'll give you some examples. I'll start with the booming voice in my head. It's happened to me once. Actually, I would say there were a few times throughout my life where I would be like going to sleep at night and I would just hear someone almost like whisper my name. Like it was like, Lisa. I probably didn't need to give you an example of that. But yeah, I would just hear someone whispering my name and I'd be like almost falling asleep and it would just send like a chill down my back of like, what was that? So my story, it is a little bit similar to that. So in the early stages of my pregnancy, before we found out the gender, I had this inner knowing that we were going to have a boy. It like hit me early on, like I want to say like immediately when I found out I was pregnant, like I knew we were having a boy and it was just this deep knowing in my soul. I was telling everyone, I was like, no, you guys, it is a boy. I am so sure. Like if the doctors come back with the results and say it's a girl, I'm going to ask for a retest because like I know it. It is a boy. And the one day that I doubted myself was the day my dad texted me and he said, I think you're having a girl, Lisa. He's like, it just hit me out of nowhere and I think you're having a girl. And again, I've always known my dad to be intuitive. So I was like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not a boy. And that night I was going to sleep at night, just like eyes closed, like waiting to fall asleep. And I heard a voice in my head that was not mine. And all it said was boy. And it sent a chill down my spine. I was like, what was that? And then I immediately turned to my husband and I was like, we're having a boy. I know it. I just heard this voice in my head, wasn't mine, said boy, we're having a boy, it's confirmed. And then like, sure enough, I think a few days later, maybe like 2 weeks later, something along those lines, we got confirmation that we were having a boy. So that example kind of speaks a little bit to claircognizance as well, which is like an inner knowing about something, like knowing something without knowing why you know it. But that is my one and only example so far of hearing a voice that wasn't mine. So the way that I experience clairaudience is usually hearing a voice in my head that is mine. And in the beginning, I used to doubt what I was hearing because, again, it sounds like my own voice. But the more I just started to trust it, I feel like the more it started to feel like undeniable, if that makes sense. And I'm really grateful for this sense specifically because where it has played a role in my journey is almost like this voice that has combated my like any negative self-talk, specifically around like the journey of creating this podcast. Like, I'll give you an example. There was a time where I was still debating, like, I knew I wanted to share my story, or not that I wanted to share my story, but like, I knew that I was being guided to share my story. Like, that felt like the next step, but there was like so much fear around that. There was a lot of self-judgment and me in my head thinking to myself, like, well, who am I to talk about intuition? Like, I'm still pretty new to this. I'm still figuring it out. And I think I was asking the question of like, why would I be the one to share this wisdom? And immediately I hear in my head, wisdom is lived experience. And when I heard it, it just kind of like shut me up. I was like, oh, yeah, that's true. Like, I guess maybe I am the right person to come on and share my journey because I'm like living through it. And so maybe that is what's providing the wisdom, or maybe that is what puts me in a position to speak about this. I have so many more examples that are similar to that, but yeah, I feel like clairaudience is one that I'm still developing. I want to say like practicing, but like still learning to tune into or develop, practice, kind of like you get it. You get what I'm trying to say, like something along those lines. Okay, let's move on to clairsentience. This is my strongest sense. So, clairsentience is clear feeling. And what this refers to is feeling sensations in your body. And in the last episode, I already gave some examples of this, right? Like when I'm doing energy healing on someone else, being able to feel pain in my body that they are experiencing in their body. So that is a form of clairsentience, clear feeling. This manifests for me in a lot of different ways, but it's really like learning to listen to my body and how it's responding to things. Like a quick example is just yesterday I was listening to a podcast while I was washing the dishes, and I'm kind of like half paying attention, like I'm washing the dishes, I'm like off in thought, and then I'm listening to this podcast. And the moment no, and then I start to feel my heart like start racing or almost like flutter or something. Like I feel like I feel my heart respond in some way. And I was like, oh, what was that? And so I like paused the podcast real quick and I like rewinded a few seconds and I re-listened to that piece where my heart started racing, and it was like a message that I absolutely needed to hear yesterday. So it's just an example of like learning how to, I don't know, like tune into information that you are receiving through feelings in your body. I feel like even in the beginning of this journey, like when I started this process of just like following my excitement, following what lit me up, like that was even maybe like a more subtle form of clairsentience. So I think it's interesting that this really activated for me after I underwent somatic hypnotherapy. And I think it's because I spent so many years disassociated from my body that once I started to drop back in, that then I was able to like really tune into the subtle messages I was receiving through my body. So I think that one, it's just like it's fascinating. I really love this sense out of all the clairs because it feels like almost like undeniable. Like I was just saying with the clairaudience, like I've learned to trust it, or I'm kind of like still in the process of learning to trust it, but I doubted it a lot in the beginning because it was like, is that me? Am I making this up? Whereas with clairsentience, it's like I can't make this up. Like I'm feeling something. Like my body is fully responding. I mean, honestly, like energy being moved by my hands, like that's not subtle. That's not a whisper. That is loud and clear. Okay, let's move on to claircognizance. So this is just clear knowing. It's an inner knowing, knowing something without knowing why you know it. The earlier example I gave here applies, right? Like knowing I was going to have a boy. I don't know why I knew. I was like, I know it. Like it just feels so clear to me. I know it. I can provide another fun example. So there was this one time, this example is from before, again, like a few years ago, like way before. I want to say it was even like 2018. So quite some time ago. This is an example from a work event, actually. So I was at a work offsite. It's kind of like a team bonding situation, and I was on a brand new team. So this was my first time meeting or hanging out with a lot of these people, and we were at a park. Did we have a picnic? I don't know. We were playing games at a park. There were like other activities that took place, and then eventually, maybe when we were having lunch or something, we played bingo. And they passed out all the materials. There's like a group of maybe like 40 people. Like it was a fairly large team. And I remember them going over the rules of bingo. And the minute they said, and the winner is going to win a $200 gift card to your restaurant of choice. The second they said that, I knew I was going to win. Like I just popped in, dropped in. I just knew I was going to win. And it's so funny because for the rest of the game, as it took place or as we were playing, I was like wrestling with myself of like, okay, I really don't want to win, because then if I win, I have to like almost like announce myself in a group of a lot of people that I don't know. And it's like so funny looking back on, because I feel like I've grown so much since then that like that's absolutely not something that would have bothered me at this point in time. But back then it was like not wanting to like speak in a group that large. Anyways, there was a person next to me who we're proceeding to play, and there's a person next to me and he's like, oh, I'm one away. And so I like had a moment of relief of like, oh, maybe I'm not gonna win, like maybe it's not me. And then maybe like 2 or 3 more rolls or whatever you call it, and sure enough, I get bingo. And so I announce it. I'm like, oh, I won, haha. But anyways, it's just like a fun little example of like, I don't even know why I knew that. At that point in time, I think I knew that I was intuitive to an extent, but just like not really. It was just like a fun thing of like, oh yeah, I think I'm like kind of intuitive, but I didn't really know what that meant, or that I was going to end up experiencing all of this. But it was just like sometimes there would be like occasions where I just like had this knowing of things and I didn't know why. Anyways, I could go off. Again, like there's so many examples that are coming into my head and I could just keep on talking. So I think I will cut it here. I think that this is a good place to leave it. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening. And I'm so excited to see you in the next one. So I'll see you soon. Bye.